Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show, the home of Googleization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy, never normal shift going on all around us. Our goal is to bring you ways to reimagine tomorrow and explore the ever-changing convergence of people, business, and technology. Here is your host, Ira Wolfe.
Well, welcome to Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization. Today, we're diving headfirst into the chaos of our rapidly evolving world of work. Disruption is no longer a ripple, it's a tsunami. The velocity of macroeconomic disruption has skyrocketed 200% over the last few years. Economic shocks are hitting organizations 50% harder than they did just a decade ago. And here's the kicker. Only 23% of companies feel their workforce is ready for 2030. Joining me today is Josh Drean. He's co-founder of the Work3 Institute, AI advisor at Harvard Innovation Labs, and co-author of the soon-to-be released book, Employment is Dead, published by Harvard Business Review. Employment is Dead is endorsed by an impressive cohort of highly respected thought leaders like Adam Grant, Josh Bersin, and Ravan, get this right, Jesuthasan. A powerhouse on social media, Josh is reshaping the conversation about the future of work. And I love that, as you know from my many conversations. It is packed with Josh is always packed with actionable and practical insights that reach a global audience. His content has sparked tens of millions of views, igniting dialogue and inspiring change across industries worldwide. Josh, welcome back to Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization.
It's great to be back, Ira. Thanks for having me.
Josh, it's been, we talked right before we went on the air. It's about 18 months, maybe. Hard to believe. I mean, we talk about the acceleration of change and how fast things are moving, and then it's like a blur. If you would have asked me, I thought it was, within the last few months that we talked. But I know at that point, your book was beyond concept. You were working on it, and till you get it all done and get it published. So I congratulate you on that. It's monumental. I've had the privilege that you shared with me of being able to go through the book and so many great insights there. Again, what a great way to start out 2025, because disruption is sort of the theme, for sure.
It is, yes. The book is in hand, which is great. And we're just really excited to kickstart 2025 together and see what emerging technologies bring.
Yeah, so let's just get into it. I wrote Recruiting in the Age of Googleization. Hard to believe. I was writing it 10 years ago. First edition was published 9 years ago. In there, I had a couple of chapters. I had to pull it out just to kind of refresh my memory as well. I had a chapter in there, Jobs and the Rework of Work. So again, what you're talking about. Average is officially over, which I stole from Thomas Friedman. And education to employment pathway is broken. So we've been talking about that for 10 years. Perfect Labor Storm is, I've been talking about for 25 years. Hard to believe, 1999. And here we are. So you're talking employment is dead. It's a pretty bold statement. Tell our listeners about how you got here, why you feel that employment is dead at this point, because it seems to be an evolution, but with all the disruption, AI, generative AI, blockchain, all these technologies going on. Why now?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I want to preface first by saying, when we say employment is dead, we are not saying AI will take your jobs. That is not what we are saying. We are not saying that you will be replaced in the workforce by computers. Whether that becomes true or not, it's yet to be decided. But the claim that we make is that traditional models of employment are failing to adapt to the needs of the modern workforce. I am very squarely in the HR space. I am an employee experience enthusiast and expert. I remember building a startup out of the Harvard Innovation Labs to pioneer sentiment analysis in real time. That's a fancy way of saying we should be asking employees what they need to be successful and do everything that we can to give it to them. And I was just fascinated by the responses that we got from companies. You know, we were young students, we were hungry, we were ambitious. We come from a generation where we are used to immediate feedback through social media. And so it was an assumption of ours that companies wanted their employees to be happy, to design a better experience for them. And as we were building the startup, we started to see this emerging message that didn't match our assumptions. For example, I remember sitting down with my wife and showing her our platform for the first time. She's a marriage and family therapist, and she just looked at me and said, "You really think that building relationships is going to come through an anonymous survey?" Which led me to pause. And it is a simple thing to say, but it is very profound, right? Are we actually building relationships at work based on trust? Can we trust our employers? Can we trust our employees? And there's a lot of studies done around that to say a hard no. And I would say the biggest assumption that we made that was proven false often was that employers are interested in understanding how employees are truly feeling. We found almost the opposite to be true. Like, leave your emotions at home. We don't want to hear what's going on. We just want you 9 to 5 in the office, do your work. We're paying you to do it. And then whatever happens outside of that 9 to 5, it's your time. We don't even want to hear about it, which is how it used to be in the age of information and AI. We are 24/7 connected. And so this expectation is creeped up where bosses expect you to be available after hours. It's hard to disconnect from the work. And again, it just is designing an experience that is leading to burnout among employees. They are less happier at work. You look at the numbers in today's world, right? Beginning 2025, over half of employees are considering leaving their company, even though they feel they can't because of the economic status. And so we make the bold claim, bringing it back around, that employment is dead, is because if you want to engage your people in the new era of work, you need to find ways that are non-traditional, that are forward-thinking, and that engage the whole self.
Huge task. So let's really dive into this. And I've probably got maybe 40 years on you from chronologically, although I do claim to be the millennial in the baby boomer body.
You look at it well.
Yeah, and even baby boomers are struggling with it a bit, or not baby boomers, but millennials are even struggling with Gen Z and Alpha and some of these changes, because what people don't realize is the millennials, the oldest millennials, are now in their mid 50s.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's bizarre. Yeah, it's really bizarre. So let's dive into this a little bit. We've been talking about this, as I said, at least in my life. I've been talking about it for probably 40 years and really got into it almost 30 years ago when I started the business I just sold, and really dove into HR. There's a lot going on. I mean, most people are familiar with AI. You mentioned blockchain, and they immediately think Bitcoin. You know, what's that have to do with work? You talk about a number of disruptive technologies. You have a company based on that. Tell us about how some organizations are actually applying this, because I work with a lot of small and medium businesses. You're talking about an environment of Harvard. I work in a small liberal arts school. I live in a small community with several thousand people is really a conservative, blue-collar-ish environment. If I talked about blockchain, they'd have no idea what I'm talking about. If I talked about a decentralized organization, they have no idea what I'm talking about. AI is coming to take their jobs. They think AI is just a bunch of robots. Machine robots that is going to steal their job. Okay. You're talking about the convergence of all this. I get it. You get it. There's a lot of people that get it. How do we take this down to, I guess, the masses?
Yeah. Right. It's that adoption, right? I feel like this is a big problem with AI right now too, is we're all excited about it. We're all working to deploy AI in our organizations, but the adoption just isn't there. And a lot of it is just because of an upskilling issue. A lot of it is because we just don't understand. I like to think it's really fascinating. When you jump back, turn the clock back to the 90s, you can see on the David Letterman show, this young Bill Gates gets on the show and he asks him directly, what is this internet thing that everyone's talking about? And Bill Gates describes it. It's like, you can have access to anything you want at any time. And I remember David Letterman just leaning in and saying, have you ever heard of the radio? Like, right? It's like the radio is already there. We don't need the internet. And it's not until you actually implement it and adopt it in your life that you start to understand, oh, I see the change. So a perfect example that you mentioned is blockchain, right? What we think of NFTs and cryptocurrencies. All blockchain really is a digital ledger. It is a digital footprint of an actual digital asset. And so what that means is that you have proof of concept. For the purposes of our conversation, I think the blockchain will do wonders when it comes to verifying your skills. Right now, the way that we onboard is, you submit a resume. This is a self-reported resume. We don't know if you're honest or not. So we've got to go check your resources. We have to get your transcripts from school, and we have to verify manually if you are who you say you are. The blockchain does it in an instant. So the projects that someone has been on, the skills that they have developed, the organizations that they have worked for, and now you don't even have to question whether you have that skill or not. So we call it trustless trust. Trust but verify. Now it's just trust, just verify. And that's really exciting to me. So there's plenty of emerging technologies. One last thing I will say about this is, where do we begin? How do we start? Like, it's already here, and the younger generation is already doing it, even though we can't necessarily see it. It's happening in Roblox. It's happening on Discord. It's happening in these gaming streaming channels. And we just don't see it, right? We don't understand. So the younger generation grasps it in an instant. It's like, oh, a smart contract executes and the game begins, and we all collaborate together in this room with people I've never met before to achieve an objective, which is to defeat the boss, right? That is already a structure in place through video games. Applying that to work is what we call the next iteration of work, or Work3.
Yeah, well, there's so many things going through my mind right now. It's ready to explode. So when you talk about even things like Discord and gaming, and again, having the opportunity, one of the reasons I'm still, working, why I love teaching a group of 18 to 22-year-olds about innovation and entrepreneurship and organizational change, it keeps me up front with this. And so some of their projects, when we talked about starting businesses, we had people starting a hairstylist business. We had people talking about using go-karts in a residential area. Again, pretty standard new startup businesses, more lifestyle type businesses. And then, a couple students came up with NILs, for college sports. How do you mainstream that? So you're right but there seems to be a polarization. Okay, and again, I guess that's one of the dangers and one of the things I'm concerned with. There seems to be the people that get it, anticipate it, trying to figure it out. And you're right, a lot of them are younger, but there's still a significant number, not only of old, Gen Z and millennials, and definitely the baby boomers, but there are some young people who don't get it either. I mean, they're sort of going through the paces. Yes, they want meaningful work. They want to feel like they matter. They're looking at more flexibility in the workplaces, but they're not quite at the place that you are yet. I mean, I would say half of my class was still a little wary about using ChatGPT.
Yeah, the polarization is real, and it depends on the voices that you're listening to and the algorithms that are feeding you through your social media, right? Like, there's a group of adults who are like, do not use ChatGPT to write your papers in college because we will flag it. We will give you an F. That is not the future.
Yeah.
which I laugh at. That is 100% not my camp. There's another group of teachers who are like,
I'm with you, by the way, with you. And I was the outlier 2 years ago when they had the meeting. It was like, how do we ban ChatGPT? And it's like, listen, you're preparing students to come into a workplace where that will be standard fare, which took me back to when I was a fresh, it'll age me definitely. When I was a first and second year student at the college I'm actually teaching at, we had to learn how to use a slide rule. And Texas Instrument just came out with a calculator.
Yes.
And we were told that we can use it to do our homework, but we couldn't use it to take our final. We would be, we would fail the course if they saw us using a calculator in class or for the final. And that was my analogy. I said, many years ago, I'm sitting in the classroom and was told I can't use it. And then I went to the workforce and I was required to learn how to use a calculator because nobody was using a slide rule.
Well, you look at the different applications, right? College and higher education is supposed to prepare you for the workforce. That is its job. It's supposed to get you into a job, and it's supposed to, get you paid well and to prepare you for the workforce. And like, that wasn't the case decades ago. It's certainly not the case. And those who are like, don't use ChatGPT, just continue to prove that point, right? Because the idea, I remember in college doing standard deviations in my stat class by hand. Yeah. And that's a useful thing to understand, but we just have tools that will never, ever require us to ever have to do that. This is just the next iteration of that, right? It's a calculator for everything. You have a calculator that's going to help you draft papers to make you not sound as mean in an email. It's going to help you, understand the job that you're supposed to be doing. And so it's an incredible tool. Those who choose not to leverage it are probably the ones who are still writing in cursive.
Yeah, which is an art, and there's a reason to still have that. I wish my handwriting was that good on occasion, if I even wanted to send a thank you note, that it could be legible. But it's difficult to make a living doing it. So let's go back and help me understand this as well. You talk about these DAOs, or the decentralized autonomous organizations. That again sounds robotic, that I'm going to show up at work. I'm not, I won't even know who my boss is. My boss is going to be some robot coming down the corridor or checking in on me or managing my time. Kind of makes sense of that for our listeners, and probably my guess, conservative guess, is probably 80% of managers and employers as well, trying to figure out what a decentralized organization. They think it's decentralized if they went remote.
Yeah, that is technically distributed, right? Distributed workforce is you don't work in a centralized location, you work distributed somewhere else. Decentralization is different, and I would love to spend some time just chatting about what that means. A DAO, right? A decentralized autonomous organization. The foundation for me is very simply looking at what employees want and need. They want flexibility. They want autonomy to work in ways that make sense to them from wherever they are in the world. They want ownership over the work that they complete, right? The traditional model of employment as found through the industrial age is, I have a set of tasks that you need to accomplish, and I'm going to compensate you for that. And that value that you generate for the company belongs to me. It's mine. I, as the company, will give that value to the shareholders. And it doesn't make sense for an employee to be like, okay, so I'm working for you, generating potentially hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars for the organization, and I don't get any sort of return on that. I don't get a slice of the pie. Why not? It's because work is contractual. Employment is contractual. We are moving to a partnership model where we offer contribution-based compensation at the organization. It's not just you working for a company, do exactly what you're told. You actually get compensated for the work that you do. And if there's some skin in the game, employees all of a sudden start to take their job very seriously. Like, hey, we all win together. And that is the point of a DAO. Right now, most organizations are centralized. It's a few decision makers at the top of a very long hierarchy that get to pull the strings, and they get all the ownership at the company. When you decentralize, you empower even the frontline workers to make decisions, to work on their own time and to compensate them for the work that they do, whether they want to work just a few hours a day or be a core contributor working full time like what we see today, or be a bounty hunter, chase project to project and work for several organizations at the same time. And so what a DAO does is it essentially gives you that opportunity to have that flexibility, that autonomy, and that ownership.
Yeah, there's a couple threads I want to pull on that you hit. And one is, when you talk about flexibility, you talk about autonomy, they've been concepts that have certainly been discussed over the last few years. And it's one of my big things that bug me when people talk about remote, hybrid, or in-person work. It's not that people care where they work. I mean, some do, but they want the flexibility. They're willing to show up in person if why they show up in person matters. Because I'm sure you've been in there and heard a billion of these conversations, but I've been in quite a few workplaces where people are required to be in work, but half the people are on Zoom. It's like, why do I have to come to work when there's all these exceptions, including managers who are, traveling or sick, and they're on Zoom, but why do I have to be here? I mean, so
the double standard, yeah.
Yeah. So this whole flexibility and autonomy thing is we're still figuring it out. Okay. But when you get into ownership, my mind immediately went to like NILs on steroids. If every employee, I mean, people are still struggling with that model of college students, college athletes, being able to get paid for their contribution to create these billion-dollar, basically income streams, revenue streams through sports. And so the law turned and that evolved. But now you're talking about that. And I haven't heard many other people really address that like you just did. So thank you. I think that could be one of the highlights, is contribution-based compensation.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because it's an interesting market right now, right? It is an employer market. So employers have all the power and they are forcing the RTO despite what employees actually want. And employees are complying because they don't have any options. But what happens when they do have options?
Stop you there a minute. Are the employees that don't have options the employees that aren't adapting?
It's a good question. So you look at the stats and 52% of employees want a new job. They don't like their job. They want to jump. If they were offered a new job today, even for a pay cut, they would take it. And then there's, a portion of the workforce that's like, we'll have to see, right? There's not very many employees who are like, I love my job. This is exactly what I want. They take care of me. We're doing this. Like, there are few companies who actually offer that. And you look at the boomers, exiting the workforce today who can barely even afford to retire, right? You promised me that if I did 40 years at your organization that I could retire comfortably. And why is that not the case, right? And so that's something that the younger generation considers. And that's what employees who are currently at their workplace, when they hear you need to RTO, what they start considering is, how much money do I have to pay in the commute? Can I still do that clickety-clackety from home? And if so, is there an organization out there that will let me do it, offer it to me? Trust me, when things start to open up again, employees are going to be looking for a company that will offer flexibility, and they're going to take that job. So, whatever's happening today is not going to be long-term. I can tell you that.
That's interesting, Josh, because it's either slightly below or we're just at 4% unemployment. The economy, at least according to the stock market, is booming. How much better can the economy be? I mean, it seems to be that it would be an employee market at this point, not an employer market.
Well, for who is the economy good for? Is it for the masses? Is it for the 1%? Is it for the specific generation? I'll tell you one thing, right? Like, I'm so rooted in employee experience design that, the idea of asking employees how they're feeling and receiving that feedback is almost a lost art at this point. in this market. We look at the unemployment. It looks great. Let's not question it. The economy's great. Let's not question it. Record profits. It looks great. Let's not question it. But then you open up TikTok and you look at workers who have to work 2 to 3 jobs just to survive. They will never own a house. They are struggling to make ends meet. Most Americans can't even pay for $1,000 medical emergency. They're living paycheck to paycheck. And so things are not okay for a large portion of at least Americans. And that is not okay. So we can't just make a blanket statement of like, the economy looks great. It's like, yeah, but who's driving the economy? What are they telling us? What messages are we receiving?
Yep.
And so I'm skeptical. That's all.
Well, and I agree with you there. And again, it goes back to that polarization. I think we have 2 different worlds that we're talking to. And there was a statement you made in your book, which I wrote down, if I can find it. But it was I'll paraphrase the quote. It was that people who don't kind of catch on to this, employers and employees who don't catch on to this, will not be left behind, but they will become irrelevant. Okay. And I think that sums it up, because there's so many organizations talking about, even with reskilling and upskilling, that you'll be left behind. But that still means they're in the game. That still means they're running the race. What you're talking about is at some point in time, and possibly in the very near future, they will just be irrelevant.
Correct.
Yeah.
As is the pattern over and over and over again in society, right?
Yeah.
In business.
Yeah. And so even going back to when we talk about the stock market and how good the economy is and the employment, we don't talk about underemployment. We don't talk about disengagement. So there's, according to, the BLS standards, we got 4% or less unemployment, which means that 96% of the people are employed. But then you look at, the studies like from Gallup and everybody, and what you probably know this better than I do, is you look at engagement. You look at people that are thriving at work. And even according to Gallup, it's somewhere around 3 out of 10 people out of the people that are actually working are engaged. And only 1 out of 10 people are actually thriving. Yeah,
it's a big problem.
Yeah. So
and look at the emerging generation coming into the workforce, right? Like, we see so much messaging around Gen Z is lazy. They don't know how to make eye contact. They don't know how to work. And they blame the generation as if it was their problem, when we are the ones who created that problem, right? You look at some of the messaging coming out of college, right? Like, I'm a CS major. Everyone in this room is a CS major. We are not even going to get a job in this economy if we get 100% on the final. That is what everyone across the board is feeling when it comes to comp sci. Yeah. And so it's difficult, right? And even if we did do well, are our employers going to give us a shot?
Right, which goes back to the well, number one is performance-based management performance management's horrible. It's even with technologies 20 years ago, we were talking about it. So we're still not good employers. When I say employers are still not good at evaluating the performance. And now we're talking about it being more outcomes based, not necessarily how we're managing all the steps, but what are the outcomes? Are we managing the wrong steps? You can have great performance management and terrible outcomes. Climbing the wrong mountain.
Exactly. Yeah. And climbing the wrong mountain is the right idea. And especially when you look at AI and how it's going to be implemented. Are you climbing the mountain that is, I just want to replace my expensive employees with robots, which is, a camp of CEOs? Or are you looking at it as, how can I 10x, 50x, 100x my productivity at our organization by upskilling our people to use AI? And what happens when there's a new work model, non-traditional employment, where, these kids coming out of college who can't find a job anyway are attracted to a DAO who's like, hey, come work for us for 3 hours, like grind it out, work as much or as little as you want, and we will pay you according to not just your hourly rate, we will pay you according to the value you generate for us.
Yeah,
this unlocks not just the productivity, it unlocks the fulfillment, the satisfaction of employees. So that disengagement number that you were talking about, only 1 to 3 people are happy at work. that is an employment problem. It's not a people problem. It's a process problem. And we can bring back fulfillment in the workplace if we simply change the way we run at it.
Yeah, I mean, those numbers aren't AI problems. They've been around for between 30 and 40 years. I mean, and it's like, oh, hey, look what AI, look what technology, look what remote work's done to us. Oh, it was the same before. I just wanted to read this excerpt, and this was from Tom Friedman. Thank you, and it was from his book, Thank You for Being Late. Now, this was over 10 years ago. You could, and again, I think this sums up exactly what you were saying. You could lead a decent lifestyle as an average worker with an average high school or 4-year college education, belonging to an average union or none at all, and just by working an average of 5 days a week, an average of 8 hours a day, you can buy an average house, have an average of 2.0 kids, visit Disney World occasionally, and save for an average retirement. He followed that with, today's American dream is now more of a journey than a final destination, and one that increasingly feels like walking up a down escalator.
I love it. Yes. Yeah. 2.0 kids.
Yeah. We're not even doing that anymore. So we've been talking about this. We're talking about this convergence. You pretty much summed it up. And again, I'm so, you talked about it a year and a half ago when we talked, and I'm so happy the book came out, and you hit on so many things, so many threads to pull there. I guess what's your timeline for this? And I know there's a loaded question, but are we going to see an evolution of this? Is this going to be a 2030 thing, a 2040 thing, a 2050, end of the century? When are we going to see the DAO, the DAOs, the blockchain, the AI, this convergence, and the majority of people will saying, wow, that was prehistoric. How people going to work, people working on computers. Have you thought about what the kind of the timeline for this is?
100%. The timeline is when these non-traditional models for employment become more viable than employment itself, it's game over. And the reason why employment still works is because our society has been built around this concept that the working man will receive X amount of dollars, which is just enough for a living wage, just enough to scrape by. We tie our health benefits to employment. So if you want to strike out and do your own thing, it's going to be very, very difficult. And you might need that stability, right? It comes down to stability. Well, what happens when it's not just from an employer market to an employee market? What happens when these emerging generations are like, look, I am making more money doing drop shipping or being an influencer. These are just examples of things that are already non-traditional ways of working. But what happens when AI supercharges the gig economy? So now your resume is, like I said, it's imprinted on the blockchain. AI mixes and matches projects for you based on your preferences, based on what you're passionate about. It'll just drop a project in front of you, and you can get to work on this project for whatever company it is, based on your preference. The future of work is going to be as easy as opening an app and getting to work. And Reid Hoffman, who is a former co-founder of LinkedIn, recently just said that, traditional jobs will become obsolete by 2034. He put an actual date on it. 10 years from now, 9 years from now, we will look back and be like, wow, we made so little money, providing so little value to companies that cared about us so little. And that's going to change to be, I'm working on passionate projects with individuals who excite me and are excited to work alongside me. And I get to work in a flexible way. And if I generate $1 million for this company, I get a cut of that, because we're all getting a cut of it and not just giving it to shareholders. So it's definitely a threat to traditional models of employment. But what can I say? We made a bold statement. We put it out there into the world. Our book might not be read until 20 years down the road, but that is the future of work. I'm bought and sold on that idea because it focuses on what humans need.
Yeah, I have no question, and I'll stand with you on this. That the current employment model is dead. We talked about, even how we're educating people. I mean, the challenge is it disrupts so many models. So we touched on compensation. We touched on work location, the geography of work. Yet it's so frustrating. And I did like 7 years of speaking, and then I sort of just got tired of it because I thought I was talking against the wall. Because it was the same thing over and over again. It's like, let me just repeat the message from last year, because people didn't get it when I said it the last 3 years at your conference, is that people still recruit, hire, retain, evaluate performance, compensate the same way they did before, despite all these disruptions. So again, there's this polarization. So can you give an example of a company that's doing it right now? Is that's managing at least portions of the convergence of blockchain, DAO, AI?
Yeah, so we actually write about a company in our book called Talent Pair. Let's kind of focus in on recruiting here. That's a sweet spot for you. The recruiting world, especially if you are a recruiter, is fairly cutthroat, right? It's just sales. It's people sales. You are bringing individuals, top talent into an organization, and you get compensated for that. Often you are against your co-recruiters. Often you don't get compensated because you brought someone to the table, but someone else finished the deal. And so what they have done is they have created a model that works through a smart contract. A smart contract is just a self-executing contract that when a step in the process is completed, it will just execute, which might be compensating someone. So the way it works at Talent Pair is it's infinitely scalable. You can have as many recruiters working for you in this quote unquote DAO as possible. And if you do the recruiting part of like bringing someone into the system, there's a percentage that you are compensated for that. And then if you, at the end of that process, are the one that actually fit them into an organization, there's a percentage tied to that. So there's no more fighting of who got credit for which, placement. And you are compensated immediately because the smart contract executes and the money just shows up in your account. And so what they're doing is kind of creating more of a collaborative way for working together to bring as much talent together as possible. And it's based on blockchain technology and smart contracts.
Is there a missing piece right now? If you had to identify one thing that's going to be the catalyst to kick this into high gear?
That's a great question. I would say this: these emerging technologies are exactly that. They are emerging. They still have to prove themselves. And, one doesn't rise without the other. We talk hype cycle. People run after AI. People run after Web3. We were all excited about the metaverse, which isn't dead, by the way. It is very much alive and being supercharged by AI. And so I think the catalyst it's the employee and the decision that they have to choose what they do for work. Right now, it's not as viable as it needs to be in order for them to feel like it offers enough stability to jump. Once it does, and once we have case studies, and once these technologies prove that it's working, everyone will jump. And it will happen overnight, just like ChatGPT showed up on all of our phones, and we're all using it. And it'll be so natural to employees who are so burned out, so tired of their company putting shareholders first over themselves. It just solves a lot of the issues that employees are feeling. The tension is going to continue to pull until it snaps.
Is that what you describe as the work without jobs?
That is it, right? And that's actually a book that Ravin Jazuthasan wrote, which he talks outside of blockchain and Web3 technology. He talks exactly about that, right? It's work, which is different from employment, which is different from, the productivity fulfillment matrix.
Right. So we need to start wrapping up here a little bit. But one of the things that, I can imagine where your take will be on this is we've heard, and you've heard this for the last few years, quantum computing is just around the corner. So I did this comparison just to help people understand it, to help me understand it. It was like, okay, I hear about these supercomputers. So how much faster is a supercomputer, which up until recently was Frontier, which was the fastest,
That's right.
than a laptop. And it was the analogy that somebody else came up with this analogy, but the analogy was that if you took every person on the planet and gave them a laptop to process a complex function, to solve a complex problem, that what it would take 4 years for everybody on the planet with a standard laptop today would take 4 years. Frontier did it in 1 second. Okay. Now, with Google's release, or Google's announcement just a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, of Willow, which is their new chip, which is a septillion times faster. Won't even go in what that means. It's basically 10 to the 25. But is the catalyst quantum computing? Is that going to be the chat GPT that overnight, hey, this affected it, but we had time to adapt, and all of a sudden the quantum computer comes online and everything just happens at such, we can't even imagine. There's no way to describe the speed at which we're going to be able to process information. And we're not that far from it. Maybe, we keep saying it's like 5 years. We keep pushing the 5 years down the road.
The singularity is coming.
Yeah, let's say 5 to 10. Is that going to be the piece that, and again, when you're talking about blockchain, you're talking about AI, the accelerating that 30 septillion times.
It will change everything. Yeah. And it might not happen overnight because there's a lot of structural issues, right? Do we have enough servers that can process that computing power, right? So there's definitely some challenges to be
power.
Yeah. Do we have enough power? So there are so many factors. There are so many factors that are in the way that won't allow any of us to predict the future, unfortunately. However, I agree with you that things are moving much faster than they ever have. They are going to continue to accelerate. And there are, I work as an advisor at the Harvard Innovation Labs. There are young, hungry, new Mark Zuckerbergs who are going to change the game before we even know what happened. And that's an exciting future for me. I'm excited to see where it heads, what our role is in all of that. But until then, I will continue to be a champion of the employee experience, making sure that, we are treating our humans well in the workforce and, what that looks like into the future.
And thank you for doing that. Hey, we got to start wrapping up here. There's always one question I like to ask, and there's probably a million things you wanted to share, and we didn't get a chance to do that, but we had such a great conversation, which was what I was hoping for. What's one thing that we didn't talk about that you want to make sure we get across?
Yeah, that is a great question. I would like to just take a second to talk about HR and the role that HR has played. HR has come a long way, right? It started off as personnel, and the main job was to make sure that the company didn't get sued. And so it just, you have this stereotype of this Karen in HR who is not your friend and has a bunch of papers for you to fill out, sends you an anonymous survey that you don't want to fill out because you don't want her to know how you actually feel. That model is irrelevant already. And a lot of HR people feel that, and they are moving to what they like to call people operations. And that is much more encompassing around learning and development, AI, moving into wellness programs, obviously. And this isn't just superficial. Let's put ping pongs in the break room and let's offer hot yoga. It is real and actual, development around taking care of your people at work. And so I just want to say to anyone in HR listening, feel free to pick up a copy of the book and learn a little bit more about what we talk about when we mean people operations.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back, this goes full circle. And I'm sure we mentioned him before, but one of the other guests we've had several times on the show is Zach Mercurio. And I'm sure you're familiar with Zach, and his focus is on mattering, helping people. Not only how do you create meaningful work is treating people like they matter, which gets back to that people focus. And he's got a new book coming out as well, so you'll probably be hearing a little bit more about that over the next few months. But that fits in line. When we talk about employment is dead, when we talk about DAOs and blockchain and AI and the robots and automation and business models being disrupted and all these things, that doesn't mean, there's a threat on one side, but this part of the solution is not just creating meaningful work, because that's on the employer side, but it's treating people like they matter, and which disrupts how the leadership models, HR models, management models, we haven't really done a good job at treating people like they matter.
It's almost sad to say that if we can't treat people with respect, robots will.
Yeah. It's sad. And I know they say that robots, at least at this point, until we reach that singularity, at least at this point, can't express empathy. They can't empathize. But it's interesting because they can create, they can express empathy in a way that's better than humans at times. And it's just because humans are so bad at it. They can say the words, they can when a robot can make someone feel better, when somebody talks to Alexa or Siri, not Siri so much anymore, but Alexa, and says, tell me something, something good. And they go, well, good morning, Josh. It's great to see you. How's your day? When a robot does that, and the person and the Joshes of the world feel good because a robot asked them a question, why can't managers do it? So we got a long way to go. Your book is incredibly timely. I'm so pleased to get it. I will be talking about it for weeks, months to come. Happy to have you back as you go through your journey and learn some more things and get some feedback. If there's anything I can do, let me know. Any final words, any final comments, Josh?
Just love the work you're doing, Ira. I look at the words behind you. I know listeners probably can't see it, but he's got such impactful words like growth, employee experience, flexibility. Yeah,
like we'll go that way.
The everywhere workplace. You are speaking my language. I love the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thanks, Josh. Anytime. And have a very happy new year and as much success as possible with the new book, Employment is Dead. Oh, we didn't include this. Where can people get the book? When will the book be out? How can they get in touch with you?
Your favorite book vendor, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target. You can pick it up anywhere. Just Employment is Dead book. Type that in. You'll find it. I'm highly active on my socials at Josh Drean. I would love to see you join in the conversation that we're having around the future of work. And yeah, I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. So send me a message and we'll chat.
Very good. Thanks very much, Josh. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization. Be sure to listen to the podcast and follow us on YouTube.